Welcome to the Schools Motivational Speaker Podcast. My name is Haroon Rabbani. I am a motivational speaker who happens to go in schools, but this isn't just about me. One of the things is that there are thousands of schools in the United Kingdom, many hundreds of thousands of young people who could do with a bit of support, bit of helping hand. And I certainly can't do it on my own. I tell you what, there are some people who have been doing it for such a long time, impacting lives. I actually feel so small sitting next to them. And one of these people, and I'm not trying to big you up overly over the top, Lee, but one of the people who's got such a wonderful reputation is Lee Jackson. Lee, you've been doing motivational talks at schools as well as businesses forever. Tell me why you started. Tell me a bit about your background.
Yeah, well, a great question. Thank you for the intro. I think that introduction basically said you're really old, Lee, isn't it? I think that's what the introduction said. But I'm fine with that.
I might be older than you. Who knows?
Look, you've got a grey beard. I've got a grey beard. We're fine with that, Haroon. That's fine.
Okay.
So my background is actually in youth work. So I, from after having a couple of dead end jobs, I took a year out. I thought, what am I going to do in my life? I'm not the kind of person that just wanted to get a salary in a job that I hated. So anyway, long story short, I was the co-founder of a youth work charity in Leeds in Yorkshire. And I was basically going into schools and doing assemblies, lunchtime clubs, mentoring, bit of sport. I'm a qualified basketball coach and stuff like that. So we were a resource to lead schools. That's what our charity was, and that's what we did. And I realized that it's other people's nightmare is doing an assembly in the first week of sort of doing that. The first week or two of doing that job, I went in to see the head teacher, and they said, "Oh, what can you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm here. I'm a resource to you. I can do this. I can do that." And then they were like, "Okay, would you like to do an assembly?" "Yeah, no problem. I'll do that." And in those days, you'd get a whole key stage in a assembly hall, which is like year 7, 8, and 9, which is like 3-year groups. And so you'd get 600 young people sitting on the floor in the 90s, by the way. No chairs. Chairs were quite a new thing. I remember most of the time they would sit on the floor. It's true that. In one school particularly, and I went in this school and they were all on the floor and there was 600 of them looking at me. No microphone, I don't think, if I remember rightly, no microphone. And it was just like, right, go and speak to that lot. And as most people would think, not in a million years do I want to speak to 600 12, 13-year-olds. I actually thought, do you know what? I love this. I started doing assemblies and I realized I was quite good at it. I learned a lot through that. Not all of them are great. I learned a lot in those early days, but really, I really try to help young people with life and life skills and PSHCE and faith stuff and all sorts of stuff, really, because young people ask a lot of questions at that age. And particularly as they get to 14, 15, that's sort of the part of their brain starts to kick in about asking the bigger questions. And I always loved being there and helping them to sort of tackle those things. And that was a long time ago. But when that sort of came to an end, I was with that charity led that charity for like 14 years, I think it was. And when that came to an end, Haroon, I just thought, what is it that I do best? And then I thought, maybe that's speaking, right? Maybe I love it. People say that I'm good at it. So it's a point, isn't it? When you're validated, right? So when someone says to you, you're good at that, you should definitely take notice because people say that for a reason. And I thought, oh, okay. So I thought, I wonder, could I make a living just doing talks and training and talks in schools and businesses and public sector? And 15 and a half years later, turns out you can. So that's
Fabulous.
pretty much my story, really.
Wow. So a lot of people, when they want to get that massive dopamine rush, adrenaline rush, they skydive or mountaineer off mountains, etc. But you chose the biggest fear of the lot, which is public speaking. And it's interesting that a lot of people take that for granted. the fact that, especially when you're talking to young people, because I say it again and again, if they sense disingenuity or whatever, however you say that word, they will chew you up and spit you out. I mean, have you seen that happen at all, or has it even happened to you?
Yeah, so I've had my moments, this for sure. Yeah, I'm part of the Professional Speaking Association, and so I know like hundreds of other professional speakers. And one of my little bugbears was when a professional speaker who works in businesses or whatever would say, "Oh, I've got to try out some new stuff, so I'm going to go into a local school to try it out." And I was like, "No, don't do that unless you know what you're talking about,
Mm.
unless you're willing to sort of, metaphorically grab them by the scruff of the neck and actually say, look, I've got this and you can listen to me and I'm good." Then unless you can sort of have that level of confidence,
Mhm.
it's not a good place to be a speaker,
Yeah.
because like adults are very polite. You
Yep.
speak at a work event, adults are usually paid to be there. Kids don't want to be there on the whole, so maybe 80% of them don't want to be at school. So your audience is already against you because they don't want to be there. And so then you've got to really do it. So for me, one of my little bugbears is speakers thinking that schools are easy, because
Mhm.
I think that they're the toughest places to speak. And we're recording this on a Thursday, so next Tuesday I'm in a school, and I haven't been in a school for a few weeks, and so yeah, I'll be getting myself ready. I will be preparing myself because I don't know what I'm walking into. Like when you go to a conference or a business event, you expect there'll be tea and coffee. There'll be a little bit of a red carpet. Everything will work, and you'll plug stuff in. In a school, you don't know what you're going into. So,
I've done a lot of talks internationally to business audiences, and you're right. Actually, especially abroad, they treat you like some kind of superhero. And I used to walk around thinking, "Oh my God, why this is so nice." Locally, and one of the things we discuss amongst our professional speakers who go to School Speakers Hub, recent event, we came to the realization that amongst the priority of activities regarding what schools need, we are just below toilet paper. Because it's not the most important thing. If they run out of toilet paper, they're going to go and buy the toilet paper. If they run out of speakers, they're going to carry on. So I think there's a bit of a massive reality check taking place, needs to take place for people, right?
I think so, and I think that's part of the joy of it. That schools, I mean, I've been in dozens, if not hundreds, of schools. I can't remember now how many of those. I mean, even in Leeds, there's like 39 high schools, and I've done probably three-quarters of those. Do you know what I mean? So there's even within half an hour of my house, there's loads and loads of schools. And what I love about them, Haroon, is that everyone is like a new village or a new
Mm.
town. They all feel very different. The
Yes.
receptionists, their attitude is different. The way some of them feel very professional and feel very businesslike. Some of them are kind of, a little bit grubby and a little bit sort of need a lick of paint, and the receptionist is stressed out. And some of them sort of guide you around the school, and some of them they just say, "It's just go through there, mate. It's in the hall." And then you go through by yourself, and then you get sent to the staff room sometimes, and you think, I haven't brought a cup with me. So like, where do I get the tea from? Can I borrow some milk? And so you get all of this stuff that happens, which is only happens really in schools, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I love, and I think it just keeps you down to earth, Haroon. It keeps you. The problem with the speaking industry is it can be quite ego based.
Yeah, and you can't walk into a school with that mindset at all. And and,
No.
and, I- and I think it's also disrespectful if you do, because the reality is, I really feel for teachers, because I mean, obviously you've got a lot of customers who are teachers, as well as myself. Nowhere near as many as you, but I've got siblings in the teaching game, and it just blows my mind the kind of pressure they're under.
Yeah.
Once upon a time when I came to this country, my attitude of my parents was, "You're the teacher, you do whatever you need to do. If you this is back in the 70s, by the way. If he messes about, you hit him. It's up to you." So
Wow.
I don't endorse hitting, by the way, but
No.
yeah, there's a level of respect that teachers aren't getting, and to be honest, they need that respect from everybody, Bonan. So you've spoken for so many years, and from our earlier conversation a few days back, understand that you've never actually left the schooling system, really. So how have things changed culturally, in terms of for young people? What are the challenges that they used to face? So the issues you used to talk about, and what are they now facing? And what do you think? Lots of questions in one. What do you think? What's the future trajectory in your mind from your own experience?
Yeah, I mean, young people have always been young people. There's a great quote, which I have put in a book somewhere, I think, and it says, "Oh, the young people of today won't listen. The young people of today, waste their time and everything else." And everyone thinks it's a quote, and actually, it's a quote from ancient Greece.
Yeah.
Young people and teenagers have always kind of been the same, and they're wonderful, beautiful, amazing creatures that's also having their brains rewired, that they're not fully formed humans. So schools and young people will always be interesting. They'll always be surprising. There'll be sad things that happen, and there'll be joyous things that happen, and all the stuff in between, really. Without a doubt, the biggest thing that's changed, say, since I started doing this in like the mid-90s to doing it now, is social media. There's no doubt about that. And you're thinking, oh, yeah, okay, all right, granddads, talk about social media. It's so invasive now. It's so part of our culture that people don't even really talk about it because they just think it's there forever. But actually, what it brings, in my experience and with my sort of youth work ahead on, where I'm trying to read the room, I'm trying to understand where people are at, I'm thinking actually what social media brings is constant comparison to other people. And not only that, but constant comparison to other people who look like they're more sorted out and more successful, in inverted commas, than you are. And so the so the upshot of that, and the downside that takes place, is that young people can always feel as if they're a failure. Plus, I'm trying not to get us too depressed here. Plus, a lot of young people are very, they seem to think that they should be an expert on everything. And so they know a bit about climate change, they know a bit about politics, and all of that stuff really kind of depresses them because the planet is in a mess. Partly my generation have messed it up, and the generation before, the boomers that did that. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think that they have to deal with stuff. And there was a wonderful, just the other day, I listened to a lot of podcasts. That's where I learn. And there was a podcast, and it was the Rob Brydon podcast with Joanna Lumley, the actress Joanna Lumley. And they were saying to her, she was part of the swinging 60s, in the late 60s. And they were saying, what was it like? And she said, well, what people don't understand about the late 60s is it comes across as an Austin Powers kind of exciting, wow. What she said, what you did realize is that we didn't know anything. And also we didn't have any money, and nobody recorded anything. So the whole of the 60s happened without anyone recording anything. So therefore you don't get the comparison. And that idea that everyone's recording everything, everyone's comparing, if young people, if something weird happens or there's a fight or something, it can be recorded now. If someone has a prank pulled on them in school, and there was many of those in my day, those were lost forever. But now they go on the internet. And so actually it's social media has changed deeply our society, I think. And I think young people, some of them are very happy, but I think that there is more anxiety and more depression around now than there ever has been. And with a heavy heart, I say that, Haroon.
Yeah, it is heavy, and it's the reality. One of the worst things is, so I grew up in martial arts, meaning that's what I did for most of my life,
Okay.
competing. And the only time I used to lose was when I was thinking about how good the opponent was, or even what he is going to do potentially. And the only time I won was being present in that moment and just practicing. No comparison. The only remote comparison is I'd like to be that much better than I was yesterday. And it made such a difference. And then when you translate that across into life, we are constantly, amongst adults as well, we're comparing. Just think about competitions, speaker competition. I'm not anti-competition. I think it's quite fun. But then when you're having speaker competition, what if somebody is the top speaker? What does that mean in real life? There might be people who are maybe not as eloquent as yourself or myself and say something and have more of an impact in a moment
Yeah.
on someone's life, a young person's life, than someone who, is international speaker of the year for the world. Yeah. So yeah, it needs to be looked at. So tell me, this is for our parents, our teachers, and actually speakers here. Teachers are doing a great job to the best of their ability with their few resources they have. Some of them have more resources than others. We know that.
Amazing. Yeah.
Why would they want to bring in someone like yourself as a motivational speaker? Is there any real value in doing that, considering everyone's got access to information on the net?
Yeah. Well, I'll let you into a bit of a secret. I don't think speakers like me and you and others, I don't think we say stuff much different to what their teachers tell them on a daily basis. But we do it in a different package. We come and do it in a different way. And because we're a visitor, we have a little bit of kudos, I guess, as a visitor. And because, like myself, because I can say genuinely to the young people, I often say, look, I've visited hundreds of schools. Here's what I've learned working with hundreds of groups of people your age. And so, and I even did, in lockdown, I did a video that you can find on my YouTube channel. And it was called What I've Learned Doing Hundreds of Motivational Talks in Schools. And it was at the World Education Summit. And so I delivered it to teachers. And basically the thing is, I guess on one level, we do say different stuff, but we kind of say the same stuff. Work hard, stay focused, believe in yourself, get a team around you. These are all stuff that a good teacher will say to a pupil on a regular basis. But there's something about a visitor. There's something about having a microphone, having good slides, doing something different to what is normally there. And one of my joys is when I sort of line up with what the school's been saying, when I, say what they're saying and then maybe add my little bit to it. And, and you get wonderful little emails or comments afterwards. My favorite comment was I was in a really rough school in Leeds in the west side of the city, which was a pretty, really tough school. And I think it was a school that Mel B went to, actually. It might have been one of those kind of schools. Very working class. As you probably know, white working class children are one of the key demographics, the hard demographic to reach. And I did this talk afterwards, and I heard this young person walking out, I think with like a mentor or someone that sat next to them the whole time. And they walked out and they blew out their cheeks and they went, I need to rethink my whole education. That was my favorite piece of feedback I ever got. And they just went, I need to rethink my life, my education, everything, miss. And she was talking to a mentor. And what was beautiful for me is that I knew that person would be supported as they rethought their attitude to education. And that was a lovely little thing,
One of the podcasts that I listen to, not all the time, but quite frequently, is a Huberman podcast, Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist. And he talks about, regarding goals, he talks about when you set up a goal and you put a vision board up and you got something on the fridge, like a poster or a reminder, it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is your brain just puts it into the subconscious. You don't notice it. It's no longer, even though it's there and you think, okay, I'm trying to get my subconscious to work. It does not work. It does not stimulate you. And I think it's the same case that if a student is constantly seeing the same set of teachers again and again, it becomes very bah humbug, blasé, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Whereas when you bring in a motivational speaker, and I think it does stimulate other parts of their brain, literally stimulates other parts of their brain to hear a different language, different tone, different stories. We're all going to have our own different set of stories. I think that does make a difference. And one thing, Lee, I've thought about this quite a bit, is more than anything else, it's to do with resonance. What do I mean by resonance? So when I go into schools and I'm speaking on a topic, and I talk a bit about my background. I don't go on about my background, but I talk a bit about it.
Yeah.
And one of the issues I had, for example, is when I went to Sunderland, I was the only
Yeah.
person of color in a school, and they treated me differently, and I
Mm.
felt different. And what I bring out for the young people is, how many of you ever felt lonely, disconnected from everyone else, and just stood out like a sore thumb?
Yeah.
No matter what the background is, everyone seems to resonate. And I think it goes back to that as speakers, I'm sure most of the speakers, and certainly someone like yourself, you'll say something which might be very familiar to you, which will be familiar to you. A lot of people might get it, but it might, just one child might go, oh my God,
Yeah.
aha moment. And that pivotal moment might be the type thing that changed their
Yeah.
life. And I think it's so easy for us, professional speakers, take our own words for granted, our own stories. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that, for teachers and people who might want to book a speaker, one of the advice I would get is get a broad spectrum of speakers. Obviously we have different backgrounds. We have different cultural backgrounds at Haroon. So it'd be a privilege for me to speak next to you, or for me to do 1 week and then you go in the week after, because I bring my my white middle class
Mm,
stuff, and you bring your cultural background and your story. So I think that's really important, is to mix up stories to get different backgrounds, and also for people to understand what kind of speaker they want,
mm,
because we do sort of tick boxes. I don't mind being a box ticker, and I always think that whenever I think of a school or a business contacts me, they've got some boxes, and they're trying to think, does Lee tick those boxes?
mm.
And if I don't tick enough boxes, I'll sometimes say to them, I did this last week. I said, I'm probably not the person for you.
Yeah.
So I pushed away good money, because
Yeah.
I thought I could squeeze myself into what they wanted, but instead I recommended somebody else,
Yeah.
because I want to make sure that they get a full breadth of speakers, make sure that we get different experience and what I bring. And yeah, I think you're right about. Um, I think the issue with me, like, I'm going into school next week, in a few days' time, and I have never been to this school before. So I could do a talk that's 10 or 12 years old, but it'll all be new stuff to them.
Mm, mm,
And I forget that sometimes, because I get a bit bored saying similar stuff. And so I always mix things up. And over time, your talks change and tweak, and your keynote talk is slightly different to the workshop that I do. I sometimes do a follow-up workshop, and I'm aware that I need to really sort of uh, make sure I don't remove stuff that's really important. So
mm.
I can tell you the 3 things that I talk about, if that would be
Yeah, yeah,
useful.
yeah. Please, I would love to hear. What are the
Yeah.
three things you talk about?
So what I tend to do is I do this whole thing about, listen, motivational speakers, we only really talk about 3 things, and it's a bit of a kind of like, I'll just be honest, we only ever talk about 3 things. And those things are the why we do stuff, the how to do stuff, and what I call the keeping on going, which is resilience or persistence, or other words that I can't spell. So that's kind of what I do. So I put things into those 3 buckets, really. So if a young person can know why they're at school, that really empowers them to do it. If they know how to revise better, and I always share a couple of revision tips, and including the best ever revision tip that's proven by science and academia. And then really it's okay, why you're here, you know how to do it, but how do you keep on going?
Mm,
And so I love telling stories. I'm like you, Haroon. Really, a good speaker is someone who collects stories,
yeah.
and we collect not just information, because that's quite boring, but stories as well. And I do my research and I listen to various things, but really for me, it's about uh, what stories can they what stories can I tell that puts a light bulb into their head? And it's those. My friend Clive Gott, who was a speaker, he's not with us anymore. Bless him, he died very young. He used to have what he called Me Too moments. Now, this is before the Me Too movement. This is a different thing, just to clarify, and as important as that movement is. And the Me Too moments is that you need to say something so an audience goes, yeah, me too. So that a young person goes, yeah, that's me, to be honest. So I use lots of stories. Some of them are sport related, but some of them are not sport related. We have to be careful that we don't just do one subject. So I'll have, I've got, so like, for instance, I worked in a majority Asian school, used to go in there every year. And I started telling an Olympian story, and I was telling maybe a football story at one point. And then as I got to chat to the kids and the teacher, I realized that they were mad on boxing. They weren't really into football, but they were absolutely freaks for boxers and MMA and all this kind of stuff. So I then inserted some stories about Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor and all this kind of stuff, because I wanted those moments. And it was interesting when I told the stories that were more relevant to them. I'd been tipped off by the school, if you like. They're really into that, Lee. So I added that story, and all of a sudden you can see them going, yeah, okay, he's making a good point there. He's making a good point.
Yeah, your presentation, actually, your workshop presentation comes alive because it's relevant and relatable to them. I'll tell you one topic which was very difficult for me to address fully was, I think, a couple of years back. This is in center of Birmingham, inner city school, Asian majority, Muslim majority. And they kept asking me individually. There were lots of small workshops. They say, "Sir, what do you think of Andrew Tate? What do you think of Andrew Tate?" I'm like,
all right.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
How would you deal with that situation? This is useful for speakers and teachers, actually. How would you deal with that situation? Because obviously, without going into putting him up or putting him down, how would you deal with a situation where someone's so controversial?
Yeah, so I would probably, so it's most likely some girls really like Andrew Tate, but it's most likely the boys because he seems to have mobilized and grabbed hold of a pretty silent majority, really, on social media, I think. I'd probably take a bit of advice in the school about that, maybe ask them beforehand. If I was being really honest, I could tell them how I think that he's tapped into something that people are asking, but I think he's one of the most dangerous men in the UK, as far as wherever he is now, in prison in Romania or wherever he is. So yeah, I think he's an extremely dangerous person, and I would happily explain why I think that is. Because I think that's the difference, because I know a bit about him. In fact, I watched a documentary about him last week, and 2 documentaries I think I've watched, because I need to understand what he's saying. But I wouldn't get sidetracked to then do 10 minutes on Andrew Tate, because I know that there's other people like Andrew Bernie Bernard does a whole stuff about men and women and Andrew Tate and all that kind of stuff. Toxic masculinity and stuff. Yeah. So
my own thoughts are, if you're not familiar with an individual, like say if you don't know much of Andrew Tate, then steer the topic back to the students rather than the individual. Because I think, because I speak at a Muslim majority school, and a lot of Muslims do like him because he's one of the people who seem to be not representing Islam at all by any stretch of the imagination, but actually speaking on behalf to some degree. It resonates massively with them. So then putting him down would disconnect you from your audience. It's almost like politics. If you talk about politics, and this is the thing, as professional speakers generally, especially to school audience, you won't talk about politics or politicians or parties, because there'll always be a whole bunch who's going to hate your guts, and we're not there.
Right. So I mean, I think most of our job is, well, what people really pay the money for is us reading the room.
Yeah.
And this is why I always warn schools, if someone wants to come in for free, or if they want to come in for 50 quid, you need to ask why. Because they're trying it out, they're selling you something, or they're just learning. And there's nothing wrong with just learning, but they won't read the room in the same way.
Yeah. Yep.
So, if someone asks that question about Tate and it's a controversial thing, I may answer it if I have time, but actually I would probably answer. But that's often I'll do a talk, like a keynote talk, followed by a couple of workshops. And in the workshops, I've got the flexibility to answer things at more length. But usually I don't find that young people ask many questions, actually. They don't tend to put their hand up and go, "What do you think of this?" They
Yeah.
usually just stay quiet like that. And you have to sort of rev them up and get them going, because
Yeah.
they
Generally, absolutely, totally agree. I think I've just been very lucky to have those kind of very highly engaging students, and they ask me.
maybe it's because I don't know what your cultural background is. Are you is it
Muslim,
Asian?
they're Shia Muslim Asian, yeah.
Yeah. So they would recognize that,
Yeah.
and they probably want your opinion as an Asian man, right?
Yeah.
So they might not ask me that question because I'm a
Yeah.
white bloke, and they probably think I've not heard of him. So
Yeah. No,
so
totally get it. So we're all teachers, parents, professional speakers. We have one common purpose, which is to raise the education standards, the aspirations, the outcomes, and so on, mental health, all this good stuff. As a professional speaker, and I'm hoping the teachers are listening to this, what can teachers do for you so that you can deliver the best quality outcomes for their students?
yeah, very simple. Be the policeman. Deal with the behavior in the room so that I can be the friendly visitor, I suppose. I do sometimes have to ask people to be quiet, or I recognize sometimes maybe 2 or 3 young people are talking to each other while I'm speaking, and I can do the sort of silent treatment, and I can go, and they know that I know. So, but actually the best thing they can do in the room is certainly be the policeman
Yeah.
or policewoman, and just go around and just make sure that everyone is listening. I don't mind them, because I'll ask lots of questions, so I don't want them to be silent in the school. I want them to have the ability to, I will say, talk to the person next to you about this, and then I'll let them have a minute, and then I'll come back and sort of maybe take a couple of questions. But you live and die on that in schools. If your whole talk is based on receiving an answer from an audience, if they're in a bad mood, and it's they won't give you an answer. So that's it. But also I think just preparing them a little bit. We've got this guy coming in, he's going to be quite useful stuff. It's going to really help you. Just let them know what they're coming into, I suppose. But yeah, I don't need a red carpet. I don't need a big introduction. I'll introduce myself. I've worked in some of the poshest private schools. And I once worked in a school in, I think it was West Yorkshire somewhere, where I found out they told me halfway through the talk, "Oh, we're closing down in 2 weeks' time." That's what they told me. Because I turned up and there was about 60 young people there. And I thought, shouldn't there be 200?
Yeah.
And it turns out they'd all been disappearing to other schools. So no one had told me that the school was closing down.
No. So communication, I think that is a challenge. It's interesting because I was talking to a colleague who's from the speaking field. He does other things with young people, and he said his biggest challenge is when he's contacted schools, according to their Ofsted reports, he's found that the ones who are most responsive are the outstanding ones, meaning getting outstanding results, and the ones who never communicate back are the ones who need help, basically. So the ones who are struggling, which is interesting in telling in many respects. What I found actually, in my entire career of 20 years plus of speaking, particularly at schools, here's one thing I found. One person, I think it was last year, one head teacher called me up and said, "Haroon, let me explain the year group sixth form year group you're going to be talking to. Here are the challenges. Here's what they're good at. Here's what they're not good at. Here's what they want to achieve. Here's what we..." And I thought, oh my goodness, this person is an angel. They're explaining my audience to me. So that way I can actually end up tailoring my talk far better for his students. So I would love, I know it takes a bit of time, but just I think if you're from Leeds or West Yorkshire, which is where Lee's anywhere near there, those parts, then please let Lee know
Mm.
what you want as an outcome. And I tell you what, as an MC in the past as well, many times, I've MC'd many big events as well. Here's what I found. An introduction, even a small one, can make or break a speaker. So, for example, and I'm talking to teachers here now, guys. We have a guest. He's going to talk to you for the next hour. It's a crap introduction. Let's just get that straight. Whereas if you put some context to it, you don't need to know their biography. So Lee Jackson, is a motivational speaker, and he will help you pick the area you've hired him for.
Mm.
It makes a big difference because it gives context, and that's so important. And it's not about Lee; it's about your students. So sorry, Lee, I've just got to say, I've got to get it
No,
out
that's
to
fine. I take with me an introduction to give to teachers. But I think all of this stuff needs to be put under the context that teachers are really, really busy.
Yes.
And it's really hard to focus in a school.
Yeah.
The golden goose for me is that when I get an inquiry, which usually comes on email, dear Mr. Jackson, how much do you cost? Are you available, in 2 months' time? That's what I get. And I always try to ring them. Always, always, always. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but I try really hard, sometimes for days, to get through to a teacher. And 4 p.m. is usually the best time to ring them, I think. Get through to a teacher, because when I speak to them on the phone, I get so much better information than an email.
Yes.
I don't want them to send me the statistics for the year group. I just want them to say, these are the challenges. These are the demographics. And then the killer question that I love to ask. So when I walk into a school, I usually double check. I say, is it year 11? Yeah. Oh, it's year 11. Great. Just double checking, because I always want to check that before I start. Right. It's year 11. And I always say the killer question for me is, if you were me, what would you want to say to them?
Ooh, wow. I like
So,
that.
what's the one thing that they're struggling with? And sometimes it's like, they're just not focusing, or they can do it, but they're getting distracted, or whatever it is. And when they tell me that one thing, I then will intersperse that inside of my talk, so that they hear that 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah.
And the teacher goes, oh, that's right, that hit the spot really. So, yeah, you don't want to say stuff that's irrelevant. You want to be as relevant as possible. So,
And that makes the difference between somebody who's a new professional speaker, an amateur, and someone who's highly experienced, is to be able to take one piece of information, what they would like to have said, the message they want to get across, and for you to then make sure you can actually pepper your presentation with that. Lee, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I know you and I can talk on and on forever, so we won't. But if teachers or schools want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, my website is really easy. It's just leejackson.org, leejackson.org. You can contact me. All my details are there. You can follow me on all the socials and everything else. And you can do whatever you want from the social side of it. But really, leejackson.org, everything is there. And my email is lee@leejackson.org. And we will deal with the emails when they come in. And we always try and respond. We try and respond within the hour if we can. If I'm not speaking, we respond straight away. So we're quick response and quick answers. And my job is to try and make a teacher look good. My job is to be easy to work with. And so everything is there, including photographs and everything they want to use, and biogs. And I'll even send that to you, Haroon. So you've got everything you need to promote this. And so thank you so much for inviting me on. I could talk all day. You're very nice to talk to, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. So all the details to get hold of Lee is in the show notes, whether you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, it's all there. So I've got one final question I want to ask you, though.
Okay.
Ask everyone of this question, which is the Lee Jackson, who was 7 years old, knowing what you know now as a motivational speaker, and you found somehow you got hold of Doctor Who's TARDIS and you went back in time, what would be maybe a couple of words of wisdom, encouraging? What would you say to the 7-year-old Lee Jackson?
I think the 7-year-old would be, keep doing what you're doing, enjoy your life. If I was talking to the 17-year-old Lee Jackson, I'd be saying, find something that you love and go with that.
So you've taken my second part or third part of the question, but you've missed out my second part, which is what would you say to the 12-year-old, 13-year-old who is about to enter the teens and that period of time? What would you say to that, Lee?
Yeah. Don't get hung up on what other people think of you. Just be yourself.
Beautiful. What a way to finish. Lee Jackson, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. And for listeners and viewers, you have been watching or listening to the Schools Motivational Speaker Podcast, and you've been listening to two Schools Motivational Speaker. Thank you for watching. Make sure you share, like, follow, comment, share with at least one person who you think will get value from hearing this conversation. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you.